Good morning. Ginette Boudreau here from 14 Wing Health Promotion. How are you? Today's topic is going to be on hosting a party and safe party hosting tips. So we're going to talk about the risks that are involved with hosting a party, whether it's a private party or any social event at work or anything like that. But before we get started, the presentation you're about to view is the intellectual property of the Department of National Defense. Any reproduction or retransmission of the slides contained in this presentation is strictly forbidden. Some of the topics discussed in this webinar may be sensitive in nature and not appropriate for children. We ask for parental discretion advised. Please understand that people's stories are there alone to tell, and anything that is shared by participants in this webinar, either on camera or on chat, is not to be discussed outside of the webinar. There, I got that out of the way. So, are you hosting a party? Summertime's coming, right? Summertime's here, not coming. What am I talking about? Summertime is here, almost at the end, and our bubbles are a little bit lifted, so people are getting together to have some fun. If there's alcohol involved, there's some precautions that we should be taking place. So after this webinar, I'm hoping that you'll have a better understanding on the rationale behind safe party procedures, the role of a social event policy and the safe practices in reducing risk, and responsible hosting guidelines in private parties. So why is it important to keep your party safe? Well, a few examples can be it can reduce injuries, violence, and death, reduce your liability, reduces work-related alcohol problems, and improves the organization's image if you're doing something at work. So let's review those a bit. So reducing injuries, violence, and death. Injuries meaning it can reduce falls. Drunk people tend to fall more. Violence, we all know that alcohol can bring about violence in people, whether it's violence at a bar or domestic violence at home. Or death, impaired driving, and alcohol poisoning. Alcohol causes a lot of problem in our society. Studies show that 43% of all motor vehicle fatalities were attributed to alcohol. 37% of fatality injured drivers had alcohol in their system, and approximately 50% of violent acts occur under the influence of alcohol and other drugs. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Reduces liability. It's expensive to defend. It takes time and resources if somebody's going to sue you, for example. It will increase your insurance cost. Money is paid to individuals by filing lawsuits. And personal liability. Those are all important factors to remember. Over the past few years, we have seen more and more companies being taken to court for injuries that have occurred following a company-sponsored event where alcohol was served. Lawsuits can be very costly and time-consuming and can be frightening as it may implicate individuals as well as corporations. So the third one, reduces the potential of everyday alcohol-related problems. Okay, so this is a big one. Absenteeism. I have a hard time saying that word. I apologize. Absenteeism, which is 2 or 3 times higher for substance users. So absenteeism, you're not present, you're always calling sick. Then we have the opposite, is presenteeism, or loss of productivity. 60% of total cost of employees' illness come from presenteeism. This means is that people continue to go to work despite their illness that reduces their productivity. Sorry, my dog's barking in the background. Productivity is reduced by as much as 25% when an employee is under the influence of alcohol or other drugs. Okay. Moving on. Health and safety concerns. Increase in the people who are always consuming alcohol or other drugs use the increase of CAFMAP, work compensation benefits, and disability cost. Substance users take 3 times more sick leave and file 5 times as many disability claims. Conflicts. Substance users use a number of have another other blah, blah, blah. Substance users have a number of other impacts, if I can say that correctly, including job turnover, disruptive behavior, declining work relationships, to stealing and vandalism, which affects morale. It lowers productivity of one worker, which results in higher productivity and workload in other fellow coworkers. Okay? So, and that can be frustrating when somebody sees somebody kind of doing the bare minimum and other people have to pick up the slack. It is frustrating. Therefore, it can affect the morale within the unit, the base, the wing, or if it's a restaurant or something like that. Changing the culture of heavy drinking and irresponsible behaviors at a special event and at a mess will help to prevent everyday alcohol-related problems and impact on the workplace. Okay? Changing a culture is not easy, and it takes time. I know from when I first started working with PSB 13, 14 years ago, I've seen a shift in how the drinking culture is. And I think it's for the best. So, are you going to host a party or organize or sponsor an event? If it's your party, your alcohol, or the event is on your property, you may have some legal responsibility for any injuries that occur. The number of alcohol-related civil suits has drastically increased, and it's not just the bars that are being sued. Claims have been brought against schools, universities, municipalities, service and sports clubs, social hosts, parents, and employees. The risk posed by drinking and then your chances of being sued are not limited to car crashes. For example, in Canada, about 65% of snowmobiling death, 38% of pedestrian death, 50% of violent crimes, and 25% of suicide involved alcohol. Additionally, while alcohol-related falls cause fewer deaths than impaired driving crashes, falls result in more people being hospitalized, therefore putting more strain on our healthcare system. Young people are particularly vulnerable to this. I have a question for you. If you host a party and your friends or colleagues are drinking alcohol, I want you to tell me what the proper answer is. A, all you have to worry about is cleaning up once they leave. B, you are responsible for the safety of and actions of your guests until they are sober. You are responsible for the safety and actions of your guests until they arrive home. It's important that your guests feel comfortable, so go ahead and join in the fun. What do you think could be the answer there? I'm trying to see my comments. I don't see any comments. Sorry. The answer is B. Many people think that they're only responsible for their guests to get home safely. But as we will see, the legislation holds hosts responsible until their guests are sober. This is something I did not know about until I got into this position. What would you do if your guest who had been drinking drove away? Before guests drive away, there are some reasonable steps that can be taken to prevent a potential tragedy. So things that you could say to your guest is, please don't drive. Offer them a place to stay. Or offer a cab to take their guests home, to take them home. Call them a cab, pay for it. Or find somebody who's not been drinking to drive them home. Take away their car keys, block the cars from leaving. And if the person gets into the car and drives away despite all of your efforts and to prevent their departure, call the cops. I know that sounds mean, but you could be saving a life. Not only their life, but somebody else's life. The courts have interpreted liability, and it seems that as a provider, you may be held liable if your intoxicated guests injure themselves or others on your property, on the way home, and perhaps even until they get sober at home. And this is taken from the Sobering Thoughts pamphlets, which is from the MAD Society. Phew, that was a big information, right? So you may be thinking, I'm never going to host a party again. No, that's not what we're saying. We're just wanting you to take reasonable risk, to plan it out. So to determine a liability, the legislation will look at the following. Was there a foreseeable risk? Given the intoxicating effects of alcohol, there is always a foreseeable risk, which is why rental insurance premiums are higher when alcohol is served. What reasonable steps were taken to reduce or eliminate the risk? Establishing clear guidelines and providing adequate supervision are reasonable steps. Was there a duty of care on the part of the employer? Based on the common law principles, employers always have a duty to care for their employees. This means that employers must make every reasonable effort to ensure the safety and welfare of their employees. So what will get me sued? You're probably asking yourself, right? As a provider of alcohol, the law does not prevent you from being a gracious host. No one has ever been held liable for serving alcohol responsibly. Your potential liability as an alcohol provider begins when you serve, give, or make alcohol available to intoxicated individuals in circumstances which they pose a risk of harm to themselves or others. For example, you may be held liable for serving alcohol to an obliviously intoxicated guest who you know is planning to drive home. Individuals will be considered intoxicated well before they become incoherent or completely unable to take care of themselves. The courts will focus on whether the individual displays obvious signs of intoxication, such as slurred speech, boisterous conduct, or lack of physical coordination. As a provider, you may be held liable if your intoxicated guests injure themselves or others on your property, on their way home, and perhaps even until they regain sobriety at their home. These general principles will be applied more strictly in the case of underage drinkers. Occupier liability. What this means is even if you do not provide any alcohol, you may be liable for alcohol-related injuries that occur on your property. The term occupier includes anyone in control of the property who has the power to admit or exclude entrance. For example, you would be considered an occupier when hosting a party in your home, running a social at your service club, or renting a hall for your daughter's wedding. Occupiers are not responsible for every injury that occurs on their property. Rather, they can be held liable if they neglect in maintaining the physical condition of their property, supervising the conduct of their guests, or controlling the activities of the property. The liability issue is often framed in terms of whether the occupier took reasonable steps to prevent harm in specific circumstances. So you want to make sure that your property is safe. You don't have nails sticking out, or there's not a big hole in the yard that somebody's going to trip and fall, or something like that. Adequate lighting. Provider's liability. So although the vast majority of providers' liability cases involves licensed commercial establishments, this type of liability applies to anyone who sells or provides alcohol to others. An alcohol provider may be held liable under common law principles in all jurisdictions of Canada, except in Quebec. In Quebec, civil liability, including that of an alcohol provider, is governed by the Civil Code. So when we talk about responsible serving practices, I'm referring to the following. Not serving alcohol to minors, which the age differs across Canada. So especially us military folks who are moving from province to province, you may find that there's different drinking age and may have to adjust. Not make alcohol available to a person who they know or ought to know is already intoxicated. And being informed with the provincial acts concerning the control of alcohol. Those are some things that you want to know when we're talking about responsible serving practices. The first one is easier to monitor by asking people identification. However, the last two require that the servers are trained to recognize not only the signs of intoxication, but also the early warning signs prior to someone even becoming intoxicated. Unfortunately, this is rarely implemented or enforced. There is no clear definition of the term intoxication. In legislation, nor in legal cases, some courts have equated intoxication with the legal limit of 0.08%. However, all of the successful civil suits have involved blood alcohol levels of almost double that level. In virtually all of these cases, the early warning signs of intoxications were quite obvious. Expanding liability. The scope of alcohol liability continues to evolve and expand. For example, organizers of potentially dangerous activities must take whatever measures are responsibly necessary to prevent intoxicated individuals from participating. Employers have been held liable for neglectfully failing to prevent alcohol-related workplace injuries and for alcohol-related injuries arising from forgetfully planned, managed, or supervised company parties or social events. Parents, coaches, counselors, police, and others in positions of authority appear to have a broad duty to protect young people who are or may be intoxicated. However, the Canadian Supreme Court recently held that social hosts of adults bring your own booze events have no legal responsibility for intoxicated guests who drive away from their event and cause a crash. The court indicated that social hosts should be subject to narrower principles of liability than commercial licensed establishments. So that's good. Phew. So now you're asking, I'm having a party this weekend. What can I do to reduce my risk? I've never thought of this before. So, no single measure will eliminate all the risk of alcohol-related liability. However, with some planning, common sense, and basic precautions, you can dramatically reduce the chances of being sued and held liable. So plan ahead. Do not supervise, do not sponsor, organize, or supervise, or allow on your property any inherently dangerous events or activities, such as underage drinking parties, drinking contests, all-you-can-drink stags, or similar events. I know growing up in university, those beer pongs, those drinking games were quite popular, right? We're lucky that nobody got hurt, really, when you think of it. If there have been previous problems with a particular event, group, or person, take steps to avoid the reoccurrence. Consider hiring trained servers or staff to help run large events, such as family weddings or major club social services, Do not combine alcohol or potentially dangerous activities such as boating, snowmobiling, skiing, hunting, swimming. Check your property and guard against potential hazards. Even minor measures such as locking a gate to the pool or replacing a burnt-out light bulb or tightening a loose railing on the stairs can significantly reduce your risk. Have a plan in advance to ensure that guests who become intoxicated can be taken home safely. When serving alcohol, you can reduce your risk by providing alcohol to a person that is of legal drinking age. Do not serve to underage drinkers, underage people. Do not permit drinking to be the focus of the event. Okay? So make sure you have other events there, whether it's board games or card games or relay races, or whether it's something on, you're watching TV together, a sports hockey game or something like that. Just don't make alcohol your main focus. Make food and non-alcoholic beverages available. People who have eaten absorb alcohol more slowly than those who have not, therefore lowering their peak level of intoxication. If you are providing alcohol, serve drinks rather than having a self-serve bar. A self-serve bar encourages some people to drink excessively. Moreover, if you're serving the drinks, it'll be easier for you to monitor your guests' consumption and behavior. Do not encourage intoxication by serving extra strong drinks, double shots, or high alcohol content beer. Stop serving alcohol long before you expect the event to break up. It is simply not smart to serve people alcohol just before they drive away. When you're supervising an event, how can you reduce your risk? Refrain from drinking, or at the most, drink moderately. The more you drink, the more difficult it will be for you to anticipate a problem, supervise the event, or intervene of potential risk. Be attentive of your guest behaviors and appearance. Be prepared to have a friendly word with a person who is becoming intoxicated. If your guests are endangering themselves or others on your property, you will be expected to take reasonable steps to defuse the situation. While the courts are unlikely to require you to intervene physically, a simple verbal warning to end the behavior may not be viewed as sufficient. A guest may be significantly impaired and at risk well before they appear drunk. Do not provide alcohol to a guest who is becoming or may be intoxicated. Such conduct only increases the risk of mishaps and your chances of being sued. If gentle persuasion fails, you may have to verbally insist that the intoxicated guest not attempt to drive home. Arrange for the guests who may be intoxicated to be taken home safely or to stay the night. Do not let them drive. Even if it's on a dirt road in the back where there's no cops. Ignorance is no defense. As with other legislation, pleading ignorance is no defense, and waivers do not waive common sense and existing legislation requirements. Under federal legislation, Bill C-45, individual managers and supervisors, in addition to the corporation, can be held criminally liable for neglecting to address a workplace hazard. So both an organization and individuals can be held liable. So the first legal case happened in Canada in 1996, where the British Columbia case, where Jacobson versus Nike Canada Limited. This was the first case in Canada to apply host liability within the context of the work environment. While at the work site, the employer provided alcohol beverages to its employees, including Jacobson. Subsequently, Jacobson went to a local bar and continued to drink. On his way home, he was involved in a serious car accident that left him quadriplegic. Jacobson sued his employer. The court held that, although the employee voluntarily chose to drink to the point of intoxication, the employer failed to provide a safe workplace by introducing alcohol at work. Jacobson was awarded $2.7 million in compensation, of which amount of the employer was responsible for 75%. So you may, this has happened. It's happening more and more, right? But the first case happened in 1996. So what is the Canadian Armed Forces doing in response to alcohol in the workplace? So they developed and implemented an overarching policy that covers all social events where alcohol is served, such as the DAOD 5019-7, CAN 4 Gen 148-10, CAN 4 Gen 230-12. Those are a few policies that the Canadian Armed Forces have put. Social event policy, okay? So this is not just for the Canadian Armed Forces, but can be for any organization, is a collection of rules and regulations about safe and legal use of alcohol at a social event. For example, placing signs that state servers are required by law not to serve anyone who appears to be intoxicated or to the point of intoxication. Server-trained staff monitor for intoxication and refuse serving when patrons appear to be near intoxication or intoxicated. Provide food, low alcohol beverages, and non-alcoholic drinks, preferably at no charge. Discourage excessive drinking activities like your drinking contest, games, oversized drinks, double shots, and volume discounts. The purpose is to prevent intoxication and reduce risk of injuries and related liability. Policy statements. Okay, the MES has practices, and other organizations have practices and policies. Something as simple as we will not allow people to leave in an intoxicated state. The procedures could include signs that thank patrons who are designated drivers and offer free coffee and soft drinks in recognition of their contribution to the health and safety of their friends. Develop a safe transportation strategy that includes designated driver programs or alternative transportation. For example, offering taxi chits or calling a friend, a relative, or a taxi to help intoxicated people. If necessary, warn impaired drivers and call the police. Okay, so there's lots. I know that when we go to MES events, there's always taxi chits available, or people are volunteering to drive home, or there's all kinds of. At my last party, they actually drove your vehicle home and had somebody follow you home so that when you woke up in the morning, your car was home, to prevent people from driving. I think that was fantastic. More and more of that should be done. Okay, so what can a policy do? If a policy is well developed and implemented, it will reduce the chances of guests becoming intoxicated, reduces the chance of injuries, reduce the risk of being sued, and demonstrates that the company cares about their people and their corporate citizens. Having a well-written policy is not enough. For it to make a difference, it must be implemented. Even if it is implemented, a policy cannot eliminate all risk and liability. For a policy to truly make a difference, however, it must address the cultural contributors of substance use problems, such as the attitude of binge drinking is a sign of toughness, right? Finally, a policy does not replace common sense, nor does it replace the law. It is important that all members place a priority on job performance and safety, even if a particular situation is not addressed specifically in the policy. So what has the CAF have done? They have various policies out there that are available for anyone to see, and all Canadian Armed Force members should know about these. And there's the DAOD 5019-7, which I've already mentioned, which is the alcohol misconduct policy. The DAOD 5019-3, which is the drug control program. QRNO Chapter 20, CAF drug control program. DAOD 5019-8, private debts for when people, for gambling, for example. DAOD 6002-2, acceptable use of internet defense, intranet, and other electronic networks and computers. Then we have the CFAO 19-1, sweepstakes, raffles, and slot machines. DAOD 5019-4, remedial measures. And DAOD 9004-1, which is the use of cannabis. These are just naming a few of the current CAF policies that are out there. If you do not know, if you are a CAF member and you are not aware of these policies, I would suggest that you would read up on them and familiarize yourself with them. For civil servants, there's a DOAD 5016, and this is for D&D employees. And it states that D&D employees shall not drink alcohol or take any unauthorized substance while at work, and to report for work under the influence of alcohol or any unauthorized substance. And then you have the DAOD 5005-3 Employee Assistance Program. So these are for the civilians that are working on the base. And then you have your other employees, like myself, who is a PSP CFMWS employee. And for us, it says to follow progressive disciplinary process, verbal, written, suspension, and discharge. So, and we refer to EAP programs. So the policies are different for different people, I guess, within the organization. but the law is the law. The Canadian law is the Canadian law. The social event policy should include a list of rules and expectations as such. Alcohol should be sold, not for free. Maximum of 2 drinks sold at one time, and serve standard drinks. Nobody should be no drinking to intoxication, and make non-alcoholic drinks available as well as food. Do not announce last call. I hear that all the time. Last call. Why do we not want to announce last call? Can you think of a reason why? What happens when we do last call? Everybody floods to the bar for their last 2 drinks or more, right? So they're trying to get as much alcohol in their system before they have to go home. Ensure everyone drinking is of legal age, and make sure and have a memo sign posted reminding people to drink responsibly. Event coordinator or volunteers are not to consume alcohol prior or during the event. For staff or volunteers who serve alcohol or work at a location where alcohol is served, training should provide information on the following: on alcohol consumption, how alcohol affects your body, how to monitor a customer's alcohol consumption, prevention of other service of alcohol and the legal liabilities associated with it, how to deal with people who are nearly intoxicated or who are intoxicated, and how to intervene effectively with aggressive customers. So anybody who's serving alcohol or who's volunteering should have some kind of training that will touch on all those topics. Okay, in summary, we can have a positive impact in keeping our parties safe at home or at work. Safe party hosting helps reduce injuries, violence, and death, such as falls, assaults, and impaired driving. Reduces liability. It's expensive to defend, it takes time and resources, increases insurance costs, monies paid to individuals filing lawsuits, and personal liability. Reduces work-related alcohol problems, absenteeism, presenteeism, loss of productivity, health and safety concerns, causes conflict and morale. Improves the organization's image when safety practices are put into place, such as Operation Blue Nose, providing sober drivers at events, or giving out free taxi chits. Offering food and non-alcoholic beverages are just a few things to name, shows that you care about your people's safety. Know what you could be held liable for. Provider's liability, not to make alcohol available to a person who they ought to know is already intoxicated, or not serving alcohol to minors. Occupier's liability refers to alcohol-related injuries that occur on the company's property or on your own property. Expanding liability. The scope of alcohol liability continues to evolve and expand. Employers have been held liable for neglectingly failing to prevent alcohol-related workplace injuries, and for alcohol-related injuries arising from neglect. Oh, my bad. I'm reading this part. I can't memorize all this. I'm sorry. Employers have been held liable for neglectingly failing to prevent alcohol-related injuries in the workplace, and for alcohol-related company parties and other social events. Parents, coaches, counselors, police, and others in position of authority appear to have a broad duty to protect young people who may be intoxicated. However, the Canadian Supreme Court recently held that social hosts of adults bring your own booze events have no legal responsibility for intoxicated guests who drive away from the event and cause a crash. The court indicated that social hosts should be subjected to a narrower principle of liability and commercial license establishment. Thank you. Harm reduction. Harm reduction approaches aim to reduce the adverse health, social, and economic consequences of alcohol without necessarily requiring abstinence. The goal is to reduce harms to the individuals and to the community. Examples include DAOADs, designated driver programs, responsible hosting serving policies, and your PSP health promotion and educational programs are all ways to help reduce harm. The bottom line, being a good host means protecting your guests, yourself and others, as well as having a good time. The steps you take to safeguard your guests will reduce your risk of being sued. Your exposure to legal grief is largely in your own hands. Thank you for taking the time to tune in and to listen to what I had to say. I know there was a lot of reading on my part today, but this is something that I don't know by the top of my head, I guess. So, but thank you. If you have any questions about anything I've mentioned today, please send me an email at ginette.boudreau@ecn.forces.gc.ca, or you can send us a message on Facebook. Okay. And if we don't know the answer, we can reach to people, our subject matter expert out of Ottawa, who can help find the answers as well. So on Monday, August 10th, I will be talking about the myths and facts of fad diets. This will be my last video of the summer, as I am taking some summer leave. And on Thursday, August 13th, Lisa White, our health promotion manager, will be on live at 10 o'clock, providing you an update on our programs and possibly talking about other stuff. Thank you once again for tuning in. Take care of yourselves and have a good day. Bye.